So, we're actually going to take a break from the gaming dice for a couple of days and talk about a concept.
An even harder one?
Well, in order to explain the concept, I didn't want to explain it in the context of this big application we've been writing, so I wanted to start fresh. So we have something called string parsing. So remember that Java is a string-based language. And what I feel that means is that if you can get anything into the format of a string in Java, why'd you take your gorilla suit off? Or your ape suit off?
You can't breathe, okay?
If you're committing to wear something, you got to keep it on.
You guys are a bunch of quitters.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. 20 minutes. I mean, you can just leave the hat off. That's basically what he did. He took his face off.
Look at his, he was completely flushed. He's all red.
That's the fun part.
Wouldn't that be hilarious? Like
Builds character.
45 minutes into class, he's just sitting there. I was like,
Pass out. That's real funny.
Slender Man's doing mouth to mouth.
We have calling cops that.
Well, you have the built-in dental dam.
That's how you got to call the cops for it. We have an unconscious.
We have an unconscious gorilla, and a masked man is trying to revive him.
And Batman's watching.
Batman's doing nothing.
He's
What a superhero is this?
Hero CUW.
What's up?
Isn't that the hero CUW needs?
Mm-hmm.
More wants. More wants.
Plus, he's like a stupid Batman costume. It's not even like the full helmet. It's like the face mask. Huh?
That kind of thing. What do you like, super for? Yeah. How are you
I'm poor too. I just pulled some
Because you know Amazon has a return policy. All you need is a credit card. You buy it, you wear it, you return it. Didn't fit.
How'd you get it so dirty? That was the adventure of getting it off.
Seriously. Okay, so Java's string-based language. So basically, if you can turn anything into a string, you can easily work with it. So if we had a universal storage format in Java, it would be strings. Okay? So what we want to do, we need to do our MacGyver thing. So we're going to create a new project. We'll call this guy string test. We'll create a new class. Call it driver. This is so much confidence we have right now. All right, so
That's bigger than it usually is. Yeah. Because I can see it. So.
it shouldn't be bigger than it usually is.
It's bigger than it
I know,
usually is.
Yeah, it looks like almost.
It's also numbered.
What did you do?
Is it too big?
No, not for me.
So it's like fine.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
required
sort of-
more effort. And look at
All right, so I'm going to create an integer array. I'm sorry, I'm going to create a string array. I'm going to say AR at bucket 0 is equal to apple. AR at bucket 1 is equal to orange. AR at bucket 2 is equal to grape. Okay, so I built an array capable of holding strings. How many of them? 3 of them. and then I filled it up with 3 strings: apple, orange, grape. All right, so I'm going to write a quick method called display array. And this guy knows how to print out the contents of the array. So this is method definition, so untapped resource. It's a class method because it has the word static out front, so we call it using the name of the class in which it was defined, which the name of the class is driver. So I'm going to say driver.displayArray, and I'll pass it AR, the array I want it to display. Run this, and we see we get apple, orange, grape. Okay? Now, let's say I was given a string that looked like that. So a single string that happens to have my 3 words in it: apple, orange, grape, with some number of spaces between them. And I challenged you to, given this string, build that same array we just built, using only what you know how to do right now. So I need you to turn this string into a 3-bucket string array, where bucket 0 is apple, bucket 1 is orange, bucket 2 is grape, using only the things you know how to do right now. How would you go about solving this? We got to understand the problem first, right? So, our 3 words, how are they separated?
Spaces.
Spaces. Any specific number of spaces? Seems to be a random number of spaces. So it's separated by spaces. Okay? What was your, do you have a suggestion?
Well, I just wanted to know if the length method counted spaces.
It does. So s.length would give us the entire length, the entire number of characters in s, including the spaces. Okay, so we're MacGyver. We're tied up in a garage. The fuse is already lit. It is going to the corner of the garage that has just a giant pile of firecrackers and stuff in it. So you need to do this to escape the garage, so you don't get blown up by the firecrackers. So we're on the clock here, is what I'm saying. Just cut the fuse.
Roll over it.
You have a tire iron, a piece of string.
Toothpaste.
Go ahead, Abe.
Do you want us to, like, are we able to hard code in values, or do you want us to be able to do this without knowing, like, how many spaces?
Without knowing. I should be able to, here. What I want to write is this: static void parse string into array. I want that guy to take a string as a parameter, and we're going to have him return a string array. Okay, So we want to write a method called Parse String into array that takes a string as a parameter. That string is formatted something like this. That is, it has a bunch of words in it separated by spaces. And it should build for us a string array of the appropriate size filled up with those words. So in this particular case, it should return a string array with 3 buckets where bucket 0 is apple, bucket 1 is orange, bucket 2 is grape. If I were to pass it that string, it should have a 4 bucket array where the last bucket has banana in it. So I want it to be generic. Well, what kinds of things do we know how to do so far with strings? What's in our toolbox?
Find the character at a given spot in the string.
Okay, so we have the char@at method. Char@at method lets us, like for instance, s.char@0 would give us an A. s.char@1 would give us a P, so on and so forth. We know that. We know how to get the length. What else?
If statements.
Okay, if statements as far as what?
As far as changing what happens when you get to a space.
Okay, so do we have the ability to say, is a certain character equal to a space? What's the character for space? Single quote, space, single quote. That's a char. Chars are 1 character long. That is the char representation of a space. Single quote, space, single quote. Similarly, the char representation of a C is like that. How do I check to see if a particular character is equivalent to a space? So let's say I was interested. Let's say I wanted to ask the question right here. Is character at index 0 equal to a space? I want to ask that question. How would I write that? How would I write the Java code? Go ahead.
If char at
Who's char at?
s char at
S.char at
0 double equals.
Okay.
I
want to know, is it equal to a space?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then do
What is S.char at 0?
A.
Nope. Remember scoping rules. What is S.char at 0 here? I shouldn't have to scroll up. I'm inside of a method here, right? Where's the most local definition of S?
The one that you passed in.
Right here. That's the most local definition of S. What does S hold?
Oh, you didn't pass anything in
Well, regardless, even if I did, we don't need to see this. We're writing a generic method that I can call 4,000 times if I want. I could pass it a different string every single time, can't I?
Yeah.
So when I say S.char at 0 here, I'm saying give me the very first character you found in this string, whatever that string is. So we don't necessarily know what S holds. We just know it holds something. In fact, we're already going out on a limb here hoping that it holds at least 1 character. Because we could have an array index out of bounds error here if we try to get bucket 0 from the empty string. Okay, so important concept there. Even though I have a variable up here named S that's equal to this, when I say S.char at 0 down here, S resolves to its most local definition, which is this guy right here. We have no idea what that guy holds. But when somebody calls this method, it will hold something. So just because it has the same variable name as this guy up here is completely meaningless. They are not the same variable. That make sense? So this is the toilet at Target. And this is the toilet in your dorm. If you go in your dorm, it doesn't show up in Target. Everybody paint a visual. I always wondered this. Does Batman actually go to the bathroom? I mean, like, what happens if... Am I bleeding? I'm bleeding. What happens if you're, like, out saving the world and diarrhea kicks in? Batman, like, dives into a Macy's or something like that. Where's the bathroom?
Where is it?
Where is it? He comes out, he's got toilet paper tangled up in his cape. Why does he have a cape? Why do any of those guys have capes? Well, so does Batman go?
Yeah.
Or is it like built into the suit? Kind of like a astronaut.
The astronaut suit, I wonder.
I mean, it'd be hard to keep it sleek. Batman's fighting the Joker. Joker's like...
What's a funny smell?
Batman like turns one of his ears. That's flushing. All right, so understand that this variable, just because it's named S, has nothing to do with the variable up here, named S. Variables always resolve to their most local definition. So when I'm down here and I'm looking at this miniature environment created by this method, it does not matter what goes on outside of this guy. This is an untapped resource. This is a reusable chunk of code that, as far as we know when we're writing this, has never been called. But it might be called once, twice, or 10,000 times. So when we're in here, we don't necessarily know what the value of S is. We just know that S will have a value when this guy gets called. And we know that S.char at 0 will boil down to the very first character of S. Make sense? All right, so this is how we ask the question, is the very first character in S, the character at bucket 0, is that equivalent to space? Now, why did we say double equal sign instead of single equal sign? Somebody who usually doesn't get things right. Why didn't I say single equal sign? What's the difference? You usually get things right. You didn't think I thought you were smart.
Doesn't the single equal sign like assign something? And the double?
The assignment operator. So what does this guy do? Well, this guy's actually an error because it's trying to assign a space to S.char at 0, but S.char at 0 actually boils down to a character. So if we were to pass in a string from up here, S.char at 0 might be equal to an A. So you'd be trying to overwrite the literal A with a space. It's like, look, A's don't exist anymore. I'm changing the alphabet. Space starts with a space. Not ABC, it's space BC. Permanently. Who has the authority to do that? Who had the authority to create the alphabet in the first place? Whatever happened to that guy? Is he getting royalties every single time somebody uses an A?
I would just pour it into his grave.
What, the royalties? Somebody has to...
I understand where the economy's going.
I think that's a lawsuit. Class action lawsuit. Why isn't somebody getting paid every single time we say things using his language? We didn't have any open source rules back then. Who even knows when back then was?
It's public domain by now.
There probably is like a catch-all. Okay, so we use the double equal sign because this is the primitive equivalence operator. Important that we say primitive equivalence operator. This compares two primitive types for equivalence, boiling down to a single value of true or false. Okay, so don't try to compare strings with this guy because it will not compare the contents of the string. It will compare the pointer of the string. it will say, is this string and this string the same string? They point to the same place in memory. It'll compare their memory addresses, not the contents. That make sense? Okay, so this is how we would ask the question, is the first character a space? All right, so we know how to do that. We're going down a list of crap we know how to do. All right, so we know how to get a character from a certain index in a string. We know how to check to see if a character is a space or whatever, any other character. We know how to get the length of a string using its length method. Do we know how to build a string? Do we know about concatenation? I think we've turned a number into a string before. If I had int a is equal to 5, string s is equal to a concatenated, well, I probably said the empty string concatenated with a.
I don't think you did.
Never did the empty string?
No.
Okay, well here, I'll teach you a new magic trick. So, and this kind of goes back to what I say right here. If you can turn anything into a string, you can easily work with it. So if I have an integer and I need to make that integer a string, the plus sign becomes the concatenation operator if one of the sides is a string. And concatenation just means glue things together. So this guy would become the string A. That's what the result of that line is. Well, actually, I'm lying. It would be the string 5. That's what it would be. A is a variable name that resolves to the value 5. So that's what this line does. Not to be confused with this line, where I'm concatenating the character A onto the empty string, which would give me the string A. Notice the difference between these two lines? In this case, A is a variable name. Not surrounded by double quotes, not surrounded by single quotes, so it must be a variable name. So we resolve it to its most local definition. Most local definition of A is right here, and its value is 5. So this is like saying empty string concatenated with 5, which will produce the string 5. And then on the very next line, if I say S concatenated with elephant, this will give me the string 5 elephant. Make sense? We're going to set S equal to whatever S currently is, which is the string 5, concatenated with elephant. So that would give us 5 elephant. If you want to throw a space in there, put a space in the front. That would be 5 elephant like that. Make sense? Okay. So now we know how to concatenate. We know how to build a string up. Okay? So, I can retrieve a certain character from a bucket in a string. I can compare those characters to other characters. I can get the length of a string. I can glue non-strings together and turn them into strings through concatenation. So how do I solve this problem? Remember, we're trying to take something like this and turn it into a 4-bucket array with apple, orange, grape, and banana in each of the buckets with no extra spaces. Well, let's think about this just from a human being point of view. As we look at this, we know our first word is apple, right? How do you know that? If you had to explain to somebody why you know the first word is apple, what would you say? What's the telltale sign? Why is the first word apple? Go ahead.
You see letters instead of spaces, and then it ends when there's a space.
Okay. So I just started reading the string, and I started seeing letter, or maybe non-space. And as soon as I hit a space, I knew I was done. So I was capturing everything that I ran into until I hit a space. And as soon as I hit a space, I knew I had captured the first word. Right? Well, how do I then go to the next word?
Wait for the spaces to end.
Keep reading spaces until I hit something that's not a space. As soon as I hit something that's not a space, I know I'm at the beginning of my next word. So now start collecting letters until I hit a space. When I hit a space, I know I'm at the end of my word. Right? So that's my second word. Now, keep reading until I hit something that's not a space, which is going to happen right off the bat. Now I'm at the beginning of my next word. Keep collecting those characters until I hit a space. I know I'm at the end of my next word. Add that to the array. Now keep reading in spaces, 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 spaces until I hit a non-space. Start collecting the characters of that guy until I either hit a non-space, or rather until I hit a space or I hit the end of the string. In this case, I hit the end of the string. Okay? How many words are in here? 4. We need to know that before we can start filling our array with crap, don't we? I need to build an array capable of holding 4 words. So I need to know how many words I'm going to find before I actually go and find them. Because if I'm just building Apple and I know I have 1 word, well, I know I have at least 1 word, but I don't necessarily know that I'm going to run into 3 additional ones at that point. So maybe we need to make 2 passes. Maybe I need to go through my string and try to determine how many individual words there are first. So let's say that my first goal, we're going to break this down into baby steps. What if my first goal was to create a method that took a string in this format in and returned the number of individual words found in that string? How would you solve that problem? When I asked you how many words, you said 4. How do you know there's 4?
There's 4 groups of letters.
Okay. How did you specifically figure that out? A human being glances at it, and our eyes immediately see that, oh, we have gaps between the words. So we can immediately look at it and say, oh, there's 4 groups of letters. How do we translate that into the baby steps needed to tell a computer how to detect that there's 4 words? So in order to solve the bigger problem, we need to solve the smaller problem. So I want to find out how many words are in this string. So let's write that as a method. Static int count words, and we'll pass that to string s. And this guy would return 4 if I passed it this string. It would return 3 if I passed it that string, so on and so forth. So how would you explain in baby steps? How would you write a recipe that explained how to detect that there are 4 words in this string? Gary, where's your Halloween costume?
I'm wearing it. Oh, they're all freaked out when I walked in. Where's yours? Oh, nice shirt. That's cool. But that's not scary at all.
It's not scary.
Okay.
What am I?
You are me? No.
Oh, God.
You are.
Check out the shoes.
You are.
Check out the omission of a hat.
Okay.
Omission of a colorful shirt, colorful tie.
You're Bob Wall?
I'm a normal person.
You're a normal person! I was just kidding about that remark.
You should see his gorilla hat, actually.
Oh, very cool. I like that.
He took it off.
Hey, people really dressed up. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Batman has a built-in toilet.
Cool. Oh, I like that. That is cool.
Slender Man back here has a dental dam for mouth-to-mouth purposes, I guess, in case Gorilla Boy passes out.
Well, be sure and capture the video of this, right?
We are. It's all that whole conversation's on.
Okay.
We're fine.
Normal person, I like it.
That's right. Exactly.
Very awesome.
Okay. So if this is our string, and we were to write a recipe or an algorithm for detecting how many words are in that string, what would we say? Or how would you explain to somebody how to do that? Remember, baby steps. This is the challenge for programmers, is being able to see a problem and getting past the immediate problem that this is easy for a human being to solve, right? I can ask any one of you, if this was one of your quizzes, this would be easy. How many words are in this string? You would glance at it, you would say, well, first of all, you probably think I'm trying to trick you.
Yeah.
It would sound like a riddle. It's like, there's got to be a catch. So where's the bathroom? I'm going to just start working that into random lectures. It's like more, better, most, bestest. Batman's where's the bathroom?
Would you try to, I don't know how to. Okay, so,
Well, forget about how you do it. Just tell me what you would do.
well, first of all, I would think that you would start at the quote
Okay.
mark.
Start at the beginning.
Yeah,
Sounds like a good
Yeah.
place to start. Okay.
and then just we can check to see if the next, bucket would be either a letter or a space.
Okay.
I don't know how you do
When I hit my first non-space, what do I know?
that. It's start with the word.
I know I found a word. Add one. Increment somewhere, right? Found a word. Now, as long as I'm hitting non-spaces in a row, I'm still on the same word, right? Now, what happens when I finally hit a non-space? I'm sorry, when I finally hit a space.
Then you have to increment, well, that's the end of the word.
Okay, I just became aware that I fell off the end of the previous word. So what are the possibilities? I could either hit a space, or I might have just hit the end of the string. But any way you cut it, I'm done with the previous word, right? Okay, so as I continue reading in spaces, have I found another word yet?
No.
Nope. But now as soon as I read in a non-space, what do I know?
Yet another word.
Found another word, increment. Keep going until I hit
A space.
another space. Now I hit a space, so I know I'm done with a word.
Yes.
Maybe I have a Boolean set up somewhere where I say, not in middle of word. So I'm in between words right now. As soon as I hit a non-space, new word, increment. Still on a word, still on a word, still on a word, still on a word.
Space.
Not in the middle of a word. Not in the middle, not in the middle, not in the middle. New word, 4. In the middle, in the middle, in the middle. Walk off the end of it. Make sure you don't try to access a bucket that's off the end of your string. Once you hit that, you know, I'm done. I'm done looking for spaces or non-spaces. I don't care about them anymore, right? All right, so would that pull it off? And then as soon as I hit the end of the string, just return the number of return my count, 4. So basically, what did I do? I counted the number of first letters I found. That is something following either the very beginning of the string or a space. That make sense? All right, well, so again, let's talk baby steps. You mentioned that you wanted to start with the beginning of the string. how would I write something that goes through every character of the string? Isn't that what I just did? I kind of walked through the string one character at a time. What is that? What kind of structure do I write to do something multiple times? Some kind of loop. What kind of loop? How many characters are in this string? Quick. S dot length, number of characters. Okay, so what kind of loop would I likely use? For loop. Lends itself to counting problems. Because I need to go through s dot length number of times. All right, so I'm going to write a loop for int I starts at 0, which is the first character, starting at the beginning of my string. I'm going to keep going as long as I is less than s dot length. And each time through, I'll increment I. So this loop takes I on a voyage that if I chose to use that current value of I to get the character at 0, or the character at 1, or the character at 2, I could. Now, what am I doing here? I'm counting words. So I probably want to create a variable called numWords. And right now I found no words. That's my variable I want to increment. Right? Okay. So now I'm looking for something that is a non-space. How do I ask the question, is the current character I'm looking at a non-space? Go ahead.
If s dot char at I
Okay.
does not equal space.
Okay. So this says if the current character, the character at bucket I, is not equal to a space, that means it's, by our definition, our format of our string, it's a letter. Okay? If it's a letter, what do I want to do? Always? If I always incremented when I found a letter, what would I do? What problem would I be solving?
How many letters there are?
How many letters there are in the string. So that would be the length minus spaces, right? We might be interested in solving that problem, but not in this case. Okay, so if I always increment when I see something that's not a space, I would be giving the number of letters. Okay, not interested in that. Now, I agree that I want to increment in here sometimes. But what condition needs to be true in order for me to actually want to increment? Well, I'm looking. This says if I'm looking at a letter. That's what this if statement says. This if statement right there says, am I looking at a letter? If this is true, what's my follow-up question that determines whether or not I actually want to increment or not? How about a hint? You want a hint? We may need an extra variable up here to keep track of something. If I just ran into the P is a non-space, right? Do I want to increment num words? Why? I already incremented it when I hit the A. I don't want to increment it again. So as soon as I hit the A, do I mark off saying that I'm in the middle of a word? Is that what you're telling yourself? I hit the A, oh, new word. Let's count that. But now as I continue hitting non-spaces, I'm not incrementing. Why? Because I'm still in the middle of that word, right? How do I know I'm still in the middle of a word? Haven't hit a space yet. So as soon as I have been hitting spaces, or as soon as the string starts, and I hit a character, a non-space, I need to store somewhere that I am now reading a word. An increment right there at the beginning. I'm reading a word. And as long as I'm still reading that word, don't change. Or don't increment. So maybe I create a Boolean called reading word. Let's start that guy off at false. So at the very beginning, I haven't started reading anything. So I'm certainly not reading a word. All right, and I'll start burning through my string. And keep in mind, this protects us from something like this. You might have some white space at the beginning. So, am I looking at a non-space? No. Am I looking at a non-space? No. Am I looking at a non-space? Yes. So if I'm looking at a non-space, and what?
And it's not it's a continual letter, another letter, then it's not.
Actually, I want to do this in, if I'm looking at a non-space, I have a decision to make. I don't want to build a compound Boolean expression, so I want to ask a second question. So if I'm looking at a non-space, I'm only going to increment if what is true. If I'm not currently reading a word. That's the only circumstance where I would increment. So if I'm looking at a non-character, then I'm going to ask the question, if reading word is equivalent to false. If it's currently equivalent to false, that means I was not in the process of reading a word. Therefore, I'm going to say num words plus plus, increment, but let's go ahead and flip reading word to true. So what did I just do? If our string looked like this, I hit a space, I hit a space. I just hit a non-space. So it's false initially. I just hit a non-space, right? Am I currently reading a word? Not yet, because this guy's still false. This is the guy that keeps track of whether I was in the middle of the word. Because I'm not reading a word over here. That's not a word, that's not a word. So I'm not currently reading a word. As soon as I hit a letter, I know I can increment because that must be the beginning of a new word. Why? Because I was not in the middle of reading a word. So I'll go ahead and increment here, and then I'm going to switch this guy to true. So that when I hit my next non-space, I say, oh, I hit a non-space. But am I in the middle of reading a word? Yes, I am. Don't increment. I've already incremented for this word. That makes sense? So when it's false at the very beginning and I hit my very first letter, I say, oh, I hit a non-space and I'm not currently reading a word, so num words just became 1 and reading word is now true. I'm in the middle of a word. So as I keep going, I hit a non-space, but I'm in the middle of a word, so don't increment, don't increment, don't increment, don't increment. Now as soon as I hit a space, what do I do?
Or no. Swap reading word back to false.
I need to flip that back to false. I finished reading the previous word. Therefore, I'm not in the middle of reading a word. So if I'm looking at a non-space, do this. Otherwise, I must be looking at a space. And if I'm looking at a space, what do? Reading word gets set to false. A little bit inefficient because we just keep setting it to false. We keep reminding him that he's false. What I mean by that is when I hit this first space right here, I say, oh, we just hit a space. Reading word is now false. I'm not in the middle of reading a word. Reading word is false. I'm still not in the middle of reading a word. Reading word is false. I'm still not in the middle of reading a word. So I actually set the variable 3 times there, but not a big deal. And then as soon as I hit this guy, as soon as I hit the O, I say, oh, I hit a non-space. That's this question. Sorry, this question right here. I hit a non-space, And is reading word currently equal to false? Yes, it is, because I'm not in the middle of reading a word. So increment. Set it equal to true. And keep going. Make sense how that's working? We're using two different variables. One variable is keeping track of how many words we ran into, and the other variable is keeping track of whether or not I'm currently reading a word. So if I hit a non-space and I'm not currently reading a word, we must be at the beginning of a new word. So count it, increment, and then mark reading word to true. If I'm not looking at a non-space, so notice that this else goes with this if, not this if. Because this if ended with his opening and closing curly brace. This is where indentation helps a lot. Okay, you can see that this else is related to this if because of where it's indented, right? So if I'm in this else right here, what does that mean? It means I must be looking at a space because this was false. I'm not looking at a non-space. So if I'm not looking at a non-space, I must be looking at a space. Okay? So if I'm looking at a space, what am I going to do? I'm going to say reading word is false. Whether it's lead-up spaces or spaces between words, doesn't matter. If I just read in a space, I'm not reading in a word. That make sense? So in the end, when this for loop is done, I should be able to return num words. Make sense how that worked? Let's prove to ourselves that it actually works. System.out.println driver.count words, and we'll pass it s. So we're expecting it to print out a 4, right? Because we're passing it this string, and we expect it to run into 4 individual words. Oh, hold on. Complaining about something. Oh, here it is. These were just all my examples down there. I'll just gut this for right now. Actually, I'll just get rid of this for right now. There's my 4. If I want to throw another word in there, somewhere in the middle, now we get 5. We can even have a single character. Now we get 6. Make sense? So we are manipulating a string. Well, at this point, we're not even manipulating it. At this point, we are reading a string and gathering information from what we run into within that string. Okay? So this method tells me how big my array needs to be, correct? So when I write string to array, and I pass it a string as a parameter, I know that the first thing I'm going to say int num buckets is equal to driver.countWords s. I know that my countWords method will tell me how many buckets my new array should have. And then I can actually build the array. String array AR equals new string array num buckets. That make sense? And ultimately, this method returns a string array. So somewhere at the very bottom, I'm going to be returning AR. So here in the middle, I need to fill AR with the words from my string. So that's what I need to do before I finally get down to returning AR. All right, so I utilized my method to count words, stored it in a variable called numBuckets. Then I built my empty array, but capable of holding, in our example, well, actually we have 6 words right now, right? Because I added some non-fruits up there. Well, a bat is a fruit if you're Batman, maybe. Does Batman eat bats? And they have a lot of them in the Bat Cave, so it's like it would be a convenient food source. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's rich.
What's up? Well, even more reason to eat them. Cook them to kill them, then eat them.
Not Ozzy.
That's extra credit. That's fine. Because I meant it. I appreciate. I mean, like, I give Trista extra credit for the eating a person comment from the puke pic. The student sends me a picture of their throw up in a toilet, and it's all red and chunky. And then she says, "It looks like I ate somebody." That's worth extra credit. just saying, in my book, that's far more valuable than writing a correct method. Just saying. Lots of people can pull off writing a correct method, but that takes a skill, which that would really impress me, is what I'm saying. And I'm not easily impressed.
Cannibalism.
Just, I mean, not just the whole thing, the whole package. Here's a picture, and here is my personal description of the picture. By the way, I just did that. It came as a pair. I got the picture followed by the commentary. I might as well have been watching the NFL. You know, just like when I was at the Bucks game a bunch of years ago when Andrew Bogut destroyed his elbow. How many of you ever saw that on YouTube or on TV or something like that? He was our injury-prone center. We traded him away since then. He was the #1 overall draft pick years ago. So he was supposed to be a superstar, but he just got hurt every 15 seconds. But there was this one play where he was going down the court and he dunked, but he held onto the rim and his legs fell forward. He fell off the rim and landed on his arm backwards. He dislocated that thing so bad. It was not bent in the right directions anymore. And I was, my seats are second row seats, and I'm down at the end of the court, so I'm probably 20 feet from him. And he is just screaming. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. You see a 7-foot tall dude just screaming.
Accurate dunk too.
I know, so good. But then when but you don't hear all the commentary when you're there at the live game. So when I got home that night, and every single show had it, they were talking about it, and a bunch of them had it censored. They had like this jagged looking black bar they put over what's left of an arm. It's like, I have to warn you people, this is difficult to look at. Like that dude who shattered out his shin last year in the Louisville. That was hilarious.
I always pictured the Joe Theismann.
Well, he's already back.
His leg went back.
He's playing this year. Did you know that? He's back. So that's one of those injuries that looks horrific, but because of where it's at, he probably has a stronger shin or tibia, whatever.
Wasn't he back practicing shortly after that?
Well,
on crutches,
I guess defined shortly.
On crutches, but he was still.
He was at the finals. He helped cut down the net. So they set it. They did the surgery to put a bunch of plates in there. probably 5 times stronger than it was to begin with now.
Metal
He's got a robo leg. Terminator leg. Man.
Where's the motivational poster for dedication?
But that's one of those injuries that, yeah, I think it looks horrific, but isn't actually as bad as it looked. I mean, when you have bones sticking out of the skin like that, so awesome. Plus, he wasn't even reacting. He was just over on the sidelines, just go and play. It's cool. He's got his teammates throwing up and crying and stuff like that.
Can't feel it now.
Oh, I couldn't stop cackling. Oh, hold on. Somebody take a note of this. When you ever meet my wife, a couple of you have met my wife before. She does exist, by the way. And we've actually been married like a while. I've been married for 14 or 15 years. Something like that.
It's not just a fake phone.
Who would live with this?
Your cat.
Well, who would live with my cats? It's Gracie. Who would live with Gracie? But yeah, we were traveling when that injury happened, the shin shatter injury. My wife's like, "What's wrong with you?" Like, she was mad at me. And keep in mind, she already knew that something was wrong with me before this. She had years of experience. So we have been together for 16, 17 years total, and I'm married for 13 at the time. So she knew something was wrong with me already. So for her, my reaction to it, for her to actually verbally say, "What is wrong with you?" I had never been in such a good mood before I got on a flight. I mean, I don't want to see anybody die. I'm not like that sadistic. Like, I wouldn't be happy if we watched a player die. I wouldn't find that funny. But I'm pretty sure he's going to come back. Actually, I don't even care if he came back from the injury. But if he's okay, he can go get a desk job or something like that, or become one of those sprinters with the gazelle legs. This is the part where everybody else says, "What is wrong with you?"
Imagine how that would play out if he did die or something.
He only broke his leg. How is he dead?
Some kind of infection. Well, that's just a bad surgeon. That's not what I was cheering on. So you get a lot of those funny injuries in soccer. Similar thing when their leg shatters out, bone pokes through their sock. And the guys are so used to faking injuries in soccer that you don't know if it's real or not until you actually look down at their, protruding bone.
Oh, that's definitely real.
You're
Okay.
not faking that one.
What's up? You're not faking this, I'm pretty sure.
That's fake. It's like, wait a minute. That's tied to your sock.
That's right. Seriously, it's so good. I love those. When you lift the leg up, you just see the thing just dangling. Think about it. Oh, this makes me so happy. All right, so when we call string to array, we pass our string. The very first thing we need to do is we need to figure out the number of buckets. And we're going to figure that out by calling our count words method. Then we'll actually build our empty array with that number of buckets. And ultimately, at the very end, after we fill the array, we'll return the array. So now we need to write some magic that actually goes through and fills our array. Okay? Well, what do we want to fill our array with? We want to fill our array with these individual words. We've already written some code that allows us to detect the beginning of the words, right? How would we then expand on that code to capture the entire word? So think about our count words method here. We use 2 separate variables, one counter to count how many words we ran into, and the other one which tells us whether or not we are in the process of currently reading a word. What do we do if we're in the process of reading a word? In this code right here, if we're in the process of reading a word, we do nothing. That make sense? But the reality is if we're in the middle of reading a word, what do we want to be doing inside of string to array? What do we want to be accomplishing? If we're in the middle of reading Apple, we want to be capturing all those characters, don't we? And adding them onto a string. So here, we can start off. I'll just steal this code as a starting point. We're going to modify it, so we're not like reusing all the code. And let's bring this into our string to array. So we're still going to go through our entire string, right? Beginning to end. We're still looking to see if we are looking at a non-space. Because if we're looking at a non-space, that means we should be capturing this, right? This is footage we don't want to forget. If reading word is equal to false, that means we haven't actually started reading the word yet, right? This is the beginning of a new word. So let me quickly come up here. We're not counting words anymore, so we can get rid of num words, right? So if I'm looking at a non-space and I'm not in the middle of reading a word, that means I just stumbled upon a brand new word. And if I stumbled upon a brand new word, what do I want to do? Okay, I want to A, begin capturing this. But if I just stumbled onto, for example, bat. If I just stumbled onto that guy, what do I want to do in terms of capturing the new word? How do I capture a word to start with? I'm going to build up a word inside of what kind of variable? If I read in a B, and then I read in an A, and I read in a T, I'm going to be concatenating those guys together and storing the result into a string. That make sense? So, go ahead.
Could you store, when you're concatenating those together, could you store that directly in a selected bucket in the string array?
You could. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do it that way just to keep them separate because I want to make this as clear as possible. But you certainly could. So I'm going to create a string called cur word. And I'm going to start cur word off at the empty string. Okay? Because that's what it should be the very first time I start reading in a word. That way I can build onto it. So if I bumped into a non-space and I'm currently not reading a word, that must mean that I need to start building a word. So I'll switch reading word to true, and I'll say cur word is equal to cur word concatenated with s.char@i. I'll capture that character and concatenate it onto my current word that I'm in the process of building. That make sense? Okay. Now I'm going to need this line of code. Else, if I'm already in the process of reading a word, don't set reading word to true. Just tack on to your current word. Because we're already in the middle of reading a word. That make sense? So, if it's the beginning of a word, what do? I start building on the cur word. In fact, I can even be explicit about this. If it's the beginning of the word, I can say cur word is equal to the empty string. Reset it. Reset our cur word to a fresh word. Then, tack on the very first character. But know that reading word is set to true now. So when I read in the next letter, I'll get into this else, where I'll just add on the next character to cur word. That make sense? When I hit that A, I'll start a fresh word inside a cur word, tack on the A, mark the variable that I'm currently reading a word, and then I'll read in the P, tack it on, tack it on, tack it on, tack it on. Make sense? Well, then I hit the space. That's down here. What if I see a space? If I see a space, I'm going to set reading word to false. Now, let me ask you this. If I'm looking at a space, does it necessarily mean that I just finished reading a word? Here's our example string. When I hit this space, did I just finish reading a word? I did not. When I hit this space, did I just finish reading a word? Nope. But when I hit this space, I did. When I hit this space, what will cur word currently be equal to? Cur word will be equal to apple. That's the word I've been building up here. Right? So, if I hit a space and cur word has things in it, has a length greater than 0, then I want to tack it onto my array. What bucket of my array do I need to put it into? Well, for apple it'd be 0. What about G? I need to keep track of it somewhere, right? I know my legal buckets are going to be 0 to num buckets minus 1. But I'm going to have to keep track of one additional thing. Int cur pos. Again, I need to remember things. I need to remember which container, which bucket I'm going to be putting my next word. That make sense? So, if I run into something that is not, or that is a space, I can always set reading word to false. That's not a problem. But I do need to ask the question. If cur word dot length is greater than 0, I have a word to store. Right? And if I have a word to store, where am I going to put it? At bucket cur pos in AR. So AR at bucket cur pos gets the value cur word. And then cur pos plus plus. Now, when I finish my loop is now over. That means what has happened? I ran out of characters in my string, right? Now, if my string had looked like this, I would have captured the final word. But if my string looks like this, I would not have. Does that make sense? So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down here, and instead of setting cur word to the empty string in here, instead of setting it to the empty string when I start reading a new word, I'm going to set it to the empty string after I store a word. That make sense? So once I put that word into my array, I'm going to empty out my word so I'm prepared to build a new word if necessary. What does that let me do? It lets me handle situations like this where I may have just been building up a word but never actually hit that final space. Therefore, I have built into cur word banana. But my loop is over, so I never actually stored banana. So at the very end, before I return my array, I'm going to ask a final question. I'm really going to ask this question. make sure there was not a final word. If cur word currently has a length greater than 0, that must have meant that I was building up a word as I ran out of characters in my string. That is, I did not hit a non-space. I did not hit a space. I actually hit the end of the string. Therefore, I need to go ahead and store that word. I can go ahead and zero out cur word. I can increment cur pause, doesn't matter. And then I have my array. Now to see this guy in action, driver.displayArray, driver.stringToArray s. And we see all our strings in our array. That makes sense? So, for your homework assignment, get this working. And what I'm going to do, because I'm only a partial jerk, is I'm going to remove the contents of string to array. Still on the video, you'll have the video. I'm going to remove the contents of this array, give you everything else. So really, I want you to rewrite string to array, the exact method we just wrote. So you can go back through, follow the video, get it in there, but I'm not just going to hand you the code. Make sense? So mimic what we just did for Tuesday, and I'll put it up on Angel. Sound good?